Well, it's another week for the love of dogs, and I'm Arthur E. Benjamin with my sidekick, Farrah White, and we're here for a story that's really close to my heart that started an organization called Paws for People. Started with a dream of a 12-year-old girl, and today it helps veterans, disabled kids, and even prisoners in our state and federal institutions.
And that little girl is all grown up and with us today. Kyrie Henry is here with her father, Terry Henry, to talk about their organization and all of the good that they're doing. Welcome to the show, you guys.
Thank you very much.
Very nice to have you.
Thank you.
It's great having you here.
Thank you.
Bandit says hi to you.
I know.
So what was your vision when you were 12 years old?
It's really hard to remember being 12. I did finally get my first dog when I was 10. Took a lot of arm twisting and a lot of convincing, but I'm an only child, so I had a little leg up in that department. So it took me a long time to train him, to learn how to train a dog. He was very much an alpha, and he was probably outweighed me by the time he was a year old. So we had an adventure, and by the time I was 12, I was ready. He was behaving most of the time, and I was ready to say, you know, he needs to help people. I just remember having that idea. I wasn't really any more articulate than that. I really didn't have a vision or a dream so much as just knowing that that's what we were supposed to do. So we were able, with the support of my parents, driving me around to visit some people in nursing homes and hospices and hospitals, and that's really kind of how the ball started rolling.
And what did you think about this, Terry?
Well, at the beginning, I thought it was another one of those teenage fads that would rapidly dissipate and dissolve into nothingness, but wrong. And then a couple years into it, I actually got sucked into it. And when we started the school programs we have, I saw the effects the dogs had on the kids, and I started believing in what she was doing. And that's when I gave up the rest of my career and switched over to being dogs full-time.
So, school programs, what kind of school programs? That's something I didn't even mention.
That's really how we started our niche, and our forte is training educational assistance dogs. And when we would go into schools, mostly special education classrooms, the dogs weren't just there for break time, for fun time, for pet and grin therapy dog work. We worked with occupational therapists, physical therapists, and the teachers to incorporate the dogs into lesson plans and into the children's required IEP requirements for their special education requirements. And we integrated the dogs that way, so the dogs really boosted the children's productivity, their recovery, their therapies, and so that was really how we started out.
And at this point, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of kids that have been exposed to dogs.
Yes.
That's incredible.
It's a big number. It is.
It is.
That is
So,
incredible.
how did you progress to the next step of working with disabled kids?
I guess what happened was I went away to college and kind of left the school program and all the volunteers and volunteer dogs that we had acquired in my dad's hands, and just thought I was going to go away to college. Typical college experience. And, you know, the Paws for People path kind of knocked on my door again and said, not so fast. The federal prison system is calling, asking if you can start a program within their institutions. And we didn't know how to do that. I remember we had a discussion. We were like, we don't have the time, money, or experience to be doing that. And then my dad found online a program that had been in state prisons out west for a long time, and found the number of a 0% recidivism rate on inmates who had been in the program. And that's when we said, well, it's worth a try to train one more dog and help an inmate. Why not help an inmate like we've been helping these other populations?
So the prison program trains dogs for, at this point that we're talking about, disabled children
Right.
in prisons. They're prisoners who have qualified in the program to be part of, become a dog trainer and training dogs. And the outcome of that, at least in the program you found, was that prisoners who graduated or became former prisoners and were released, they just didn't come back.
Right. Right.
Well, that's an amazing contribution to the prison system, given
really
that
is.
recidivism rates run 80-90%, and
Right.
here we're talking about 0 to 10%.
Right.
In fact, we have many of them now who actually volunteer full-time with us and help us transition the dogs to our clients. So what they've learned in prison, they thought was valuable enough that now that they're out, they're with us and they're helping us place dogs with children with disabilities and with the soldiers.
So there's the soldiers.
Yes. So, which is another organization that you have.
That's another branch. That's sort of evolved into my forte. She was the star of the show up until 2009, and then all of a sudden, veterans. And being one of those myself, and having had dogs as part of my recovery from PTSD for many, many years, it just became sort of one of those things that happened, and all of a sudden, we're working with soldiers that are in the psychiatric ward, having a cocktail of 13 different drugs and 4 suicide attempts. And all of a sudden, within 5 months, we have that soldier back out into society, not integrated like he was before, but at least enough that he can function in society. And it just has evolved and snowballed from there to where right now it's about a 50-50 split. Kids or young adults and soldiers and veterans with PTSD.
Well, let's put a face on this. Why don't you talk a little bit about Jeff Mitchell or April in terms of what a dog's done for, well, let's take Jeff and his dog,
Tazzy. Jeff was a 2-time Iraqi veteran, came back and turned into what they call a cave dweller. He wouldn't leave the house. In fact, he lived the first 9 months out of the Army in the basement of his parents' house in total seclusion and blackout. He joined our program about 2 years ago. We went through the process of having a dog find him through the prison system. And then we went through about 10 months of working with him at the military bases. It didn't work out in the first part of it, and we had to take the dog back, and he had to go into more in-depth work with his treatment team. About 4 months later, we had a dog that we'd rescued from Afghanistan who all of a sudden had got herself in trouble because of her doggy PTSD coming out of a war zone. And we sort of matched them, or the fates matched them up together. Now Jeff is, a year later, he just finished up, and Tazzy got her certification as a service dog, and Jeff is able to go out and interact, go to shopping, go to stores, go in front of a bunch of other former veterans and talk to them about his experience. He goes back to the VA psych ward where he was at one point and talks to those guys, and it's been a real evolution for him.
But Jeff, I saw him at your reunion event in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Jeff is actually becoming a leader in the program and spurs other people on to work with dogs and to move their dogs ahead in the program. And to take your phrase, he's no longer a cave dweller. He comes out and he goes to restaurants with his folks, and he can make it down to the Veterans Hospital for his weekly meetings, and Tazzy and him are a good pair.
Yeah, in fact, Jeff, I think, would tell you if you were sitting here, his next step in life is to become what we call a mentor trainer for the other veterans that are in our program, to be their sort of lead by example, illustrate what can happen if you apply yourself, and learn how to use the dog to mitigate your symptoms.
So if we take this program, you train these dogs in prisons to, as I best recall it, 100+ commands, from turning the lights on and off to picking up a towel, or for somebody who's wheelchair bound, a credit card, a dollar bill they drop on the floor, a variety of different commands. And then you bump, I think is the best word, the dog's up against, and the dog chooses someone. And then you cut down on the number of commands. How does that work?
The last probably 4 to 6 months of a dog's training. Any type of dog that we're training for either sort of clientele is what we call customized training. So that's why we bump the dogs at a really early age. We don't match the dogs when they're done, so to speak, because we spend the rest of their training customizing them for what that person's needs are, as opposed to keeping them on a broad spectrum of training.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a different skill set that a client in a wheelchair would need, as an example.
Sure.
Versus a veteran who has PTSD, TBI. In a wheelchair, they may need to have the lights turned on because they can't do it themselves. A veteran with PTSD is most likely able to turn the lights on. So we sort of channel the dog into the appropriate training scenario to fit what that person needs. So those 100 commands generally come down to 30 or 40 well-defined commands for that specific
And to clarify,
person.
PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder, and TBI is traumatic brain injury, for
Correct.
those that are watching that don't know the terms.
Right.
Sure. And now who have you brought with you today?
Well,
talk to you.
this is Wyatt, and he's Kyrie's service dog. This is Cheney. Wake up.
Don't wake up.
Okay, we'll leave him alone. Oh, there he is. Thank you. Cheney is my second PTSD service dog. And this is Fallon. Fallon's being trained for a major, Air Force major veteran who has chronic PTSD and also has several of his vertebrae fused together based on an injury. So he has a lot of trouble bending over and picking things up. So Fallon is being trained to work with him in terms of, I guess he wants to be interviewed too. And then Fallon's other side job is to be able to pick up just about anything that he drops, because he can't bend over to pick it up.
And how long is that, some of the training processes that you do with these dogs?
You know, the dogs are amazing, especially the younger we get them, the faster they learn. The ones that we breed, we start training when they're 2 days old. So they learn everything by the time they're about 6 months old, but they still have to grow up just like the rest of us. So a lot of it is refinement and maturity and repetition and practice and what we call generalization in the dog training world. So usually they can be placed anywhere between 18 months old, and then, you know, our rowdier, a little bit more headstrong boys might be closer to 2 or even a little after when they're really ready.
And you run a program at in North Carolina,
Yes.
right, that oversees the
Yes,
training?
it's very exciting. It's the first program of its kind in the country. It's at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and we have a 4-course certificate program, and the students learn all about assistance dogs and the people that they help, and then about training theory and practice for assistance dogs. And then in their 3rd and 4th semester, they're actually assigned an assistance dog who is at that year and a half old point and needs their public access training. So the dogs live with those students, and the students finish their training and help turn them over to the person that they're going to. And then that makes the student both knowledgeable and eligible to receive one of our dogs to use in their career, like physical therapist, recreational therapist, special education teacher. We have gerontology majors, so on and so forth. So it's very much applicable to the students. It's not something they're just doing in college.
So let's take the full cycle. So dogs are helped. Some of these dogs are rescue dogs
Yep.
that are
They
saved
sure
from
are.
euthanasia, and
Yep.
the dogs go into the prison program and they're trained to a certain level.
Yep.
Then the former prisoners and other trainers you have work on customized training to take the dogs who have bumped against a disabled youth or a veteran, and those dogs then begin to transition to serve that person for the rest of their life.
Right.
And now you take that and you're using the UNC program to complete some of that training and to train future leaders in
Right.
education, therapy, psychology, and a variety of other disciplines to use service dogs in their careers for the rest of their lives. An amazing organization.
And then also to those students, the primary emphasis from our perspective is to get them to the point where they're advocates the rest of their lives and understand the application of these dogs, so that 20 years from now when they're running companies and stuff, we don't run into the problems of, you know, you can't bring a dog in here, or a company would more be inclined to help support these dogs, because they now know what they can do and how they can affect and change and save people's lives.
Well, and let's talk about a few very specific disabled children that you guys work with. I understand there's Allie and Alex and Camden, and it's Ellie actually, isn't
Ellie.
it?
Ellie. Yeah,
Yes,
Ellie
and
and
Amanda.
Ella and Amanda.
So can you tell us a little bit about their stories?
Oh man, that's one of the heartthrobs.
Ellie and Amanda.
Amanda was a very special little girl who was born with a syndrome called infantile spasm. It's a form of epilepsy. And by the time she was less than 2 years old, she had to have half of her brain removed to control the seizures. So she is really challenged in terms of her cognitive abilities and her mobility issues. And Ellie was one of the first dogs to come out of the first class of training at the prisons. And the scenes you're seeing there, some of them were of the actual inmates getting to meet Amanda and Ellie meeting Amanda. And Ellie picked Amanda out of all the dogs that day. She just went right up to Amanda and stuck to her like glue. She's now been placed about 3.5, 4 years now. And Ellie can detect Amanda's seizures as much as 8 hours before they happen.
Wow.
She's been trained as a seizure response dog, so when Amanda goes into a seizure, Ellie can go get the phone, go get the medicine bag, and go open the doors for the EMTs. So that changed Amanda's family's life, because now one adult can oversee Amanda versus 2. So that changed their whole family dynamics and ability to interact. There's a special bond there, and Ellie helps the physical therapist and the occupational therapist and all of Amanda's. Amanda has a special harness, and that's how she does her walking therapies, is with Ellie's next to her. And it's a special bond. You can talk about Camden.
Alex is another one of our children clients. He has mitochondrial disease, so that also affects his ability to have speech, independent movement, that sort of thing. So he has to undergo a lot of regular medical procedures due to his disorder. So Camden not only retrieves things for him, he plays with him, he helps him with his homebound education. When his teachers and therapists come, the teachers and therapists include Camden in his IEPs and his lesson plans. Camden can go to every medical appointment. Alex is just now actually spending over a month in the hospital with a surgery that ended up being complicated and kept him there, and Camden's been there all day, every day. It's just not only for the child, but for the whole family dynamic. It just changes the morale, the independence, the ability, and just kind of makes some of the challenges disappear.
Wow, it sounds incredible, and just seeing some of that footage, you can tell.
And Camden loves to help.
He does.
He loves to help, and it really takes a special dog to want to work with a child and to be that responsive to a child who doesn't act the way that they have learned humans typically act. It's something special that those dogs understand and respond to, and that's why we really let the dogs choose their job.
And the way it came home to me that that placement was perfect was one of the first home visits we did in the transfer training. Alex actually has a little ball, and he started giggling and laughing, and he and Camden played fetch for a good 15 minutes.
And Camden brought the ball back to Alex.
Every time.
Even though there was no ability to have direction or speech. Sometimes those things just click.
And his mom was just sitting there, you know, just tears running down her face watching the joy, because Alex doesn't get a whole lot of joy in his life, so
Yeah.
that was a good part.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, that is truly amazing.
Yeah.
I think we're going to take a little break, but when we come back, we're going to talk to Kyrie and Terry some more and find out again about all of the different programs, Pause for People, Pause for Vets, and Pause for Prisons. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Well, we're back, and we're with Terry and Kyrie Henry from Paws for People, Paws for Prisons, Paws for Vets, Paws for, it's giving birth to a lot of organizations, and really where I think we should focus this next segment is talking about our heroes. You know, we have a bunch of young men and women coming back from, not so young, some of them, but coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's forecast that we'll have 600,000 vets coming back with post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injury, or sexual trauma disorder, and 600,000 youth coming back, again, not all youth, but 600,000 Americans who have served our country, who have given the best of themselves for our freedom, and they're coming back with a problem. And how do dogs play into that? And can you tell us a little bit how it played into April's life?
Dogs, is anybody who knows dogs, is dog lover, have that innate ability to connect with us in a lot of different levels and in a lot of different ways. And one of the things we've been working with the dogs is a way to control and mitigate the symptoms of PTSD by teaching our veterans in active duty how to deflect some of their symptoms and apply the dog to mitigate those symptoms. One particular young lady had 4 tours in Iraq. She was assigned to a medevac unit in northern Iraq, which meant she got to do a lot of not necessarily fun things. And she came back, and she was, as she says in her own words, she was totally broken. Drugs, a lot of different drugs, psychotherapy, individual group, none of them seemed to give her much hope or much relief. While she was over there, she was also injured while she was in the hospital in country and medicated, she was sexually assaulted. So she also has what's known as military sexual trauma, or MST. She joined our program, spent the first year with one of our dogs, learning how to go out and reintegrate and go back and fight her agoraphobia and her anxiety and panics in the public, and get off of some of her medications and reduce the levels and the combinations. And last November she was given her permanent dog, which is Claire. And Claire is one of our breeders. She's given us, in fact, that's Claire's puppy right there, one of them. She's given us in the neighborhood of 11 service dogs already. And her and April now have that bond that we all talk about with the dog that allows us to overcome the anxiety or reduce the agoraphobia or those kind of symptoms just by having the dog with us. And she, one of her missions over there, her crew chief saved her life. And she'd always wanted to go and honor him by going to Arlington.
He took a bullet for her.
He took a bullet for her. He took several bullets for her. And in January, she was finally, with Claire, able to go to Arlington and visit his grave.
That's unbelievable that the companionship of a dog makes it possible to do something that is that confronting.
And I think what else is really important and kind of makes our approach different is that while many people are becoming aware of the effects of psychiatric service dogs and how important and helpful they are, the dog itself is not a cure or a medication or a fix. It's how you're taught to use the dog and integrate the dog into your therapies in your life. So we work closely with all of our clients' treatment teams. We integrate the dogs as assistive technology, as an intervention in their treatment, and we use the dogs as part of cognitive behavioral therapy. So they really are a therapy tool. They're not, you know, here's a gift to you that's going to make you feel better. That's really not how it works. And so it is, like you heard about Jeff and April, we invest a lot of time up front. We work with them one-on-one, and it's a process. It's not a product.
Well, I got to tell you, it seems so incredible that you are helping these people that have helped our country so much, and giving them a chance at coming back and having some sense of normal life after all that they've seen and done. Now, for people who are watching the show, what can they do to help support you in this program and to help maybe continue it and advance it and grow it?
We have a slew of volunteers. That's the only way things are able to work. So when people come to us and want to invest time in us, we find their gifts and put them to good use. You know, a limiting factor with us, just as everything else in the world, is funding. We're limited where we can place dogs at this point in time because they have to be near enough to our trainers, because all of our trainers work on a volunteer basis. So this is a second job for everyone. So, you know, the bigger that we can make things, the wider our reach can be, and the more dogs we can place and the more people we can ultimately save, because as powerful as that is to say, that's really what's happening, and that's what they're telling us.
Your standards, the standards that have been set in these programs, are standards that can be shared with other organizations, and really your dream is to take this out nationally, not to run the program, but to share what you've learned with organizations to make this work.
Right.
And so I think that part of what we could do is write to your congressman, write to your senator, tell them that there's a program that has standards that can help the country recover from Iraq and Afghanistan and return our youth to our heroes to functionality in our society.
Yes, I think that's so important. And you guys, thank you so much, Kyrie and Terry,
Thank you.
For coming and sharing your time. And if you want to learn more about Pause for People, Pause for Vets, or Pause for Prison, log on to pauseforpeople.org, and that's pause for the number people.org. And remember, you can always find out more about For the Love of Dogs at AmericanDogRescue.org. And be sure, as always, to follow us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, follow us on YouTube. You can find out more about the show and the upcoming shows, and also information more about our guests that we have and all of their websites.
And I'll appropriately end the program today with God Bless America.